Um, well, it's our 2 minute break turned into an 8 minute break, but we're back and we have a group of folks with us from the Ag Agency. Um, and we want to go over, I believe, at some points questions that we had about going over doing the miscellaneous ag bill. And I don't know who wants to lead off first.
If it's okay, Senator, I think I was going to try to give an overview and answer the questions, and then we've got some experts in the room too that can fill in any blanks, if that's okay.
Yeah, and I want to make a note that we have the president of Farm Bureau with us this morning, Joe Tibbetts. Welcome. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I'm a little hesitant to take this chair because our good deputy secretary tells me it's not very flattering to my hairless head.
Well, you could have worn a hat.
Well, I didn't think that would be appropriate.
Maybe we should put our funds together and if you may buy a tooth and set it on the table.
I would appreciate that.
So, good morning and welcome, Steve.
Good morning.
And yesterday we went through the bill with Michael O'Grady, and we had just had some structural questions and so if you want to lead off,
That'd be great. If you don't mind, I'll quickly go through each one to just try to tell you what we're trying to accomplish. And just for the record, it's Steve Collier. I'm with the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. Thank you so much for having us. And also E.B. Flory, our Director of Food Safety Consumer Protection is here, and Dr. Kristen Haas, who's a state veterinarian, is here as well. So I don't know if any of you want it, but I have printouts of the language if you like, just because
We have it.
You have it all?
Is it draft 1.1 still?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
We got
Okay.
it. Thank you.
My eyes start to go cross-eyed after looking at a screen all day. So once in a while, I need some paper.
Me too.
So the section one, the first one is, we think it's a very simple but important correction. And what it is about livestock quarantine. So we already have the authority to quarantine animals that potentially have a contagious disease for all the obvious reasons. We also already have the clear authority to quarantine an animal that the meat of the animal may be adulterated, so that it would be unsafe to slaughter that animal and eat that animal. The whole idea of quarantine, keep in mind, is just a precautionary initial step. We need to initially, when we get a report, we have to be able to have quick emergency powers to step in and stop any transfers, stop any consumption, stop anything from happening until we know more. That's the purpose of a quarantine. A quarantine may end with everything being perfect, or a quarantine may end where animals potentially have to be condemned because there's a reason that they're not safe. But the quarantine is just that preliminary authority for our animal health experts to be able to go in and say, okay, let's find out more. Let's see what we need to do. Without that authority, somebody can transfer their animals, somebody consume the product from the animals, which obviously can compromise public health. So we have that authority already. What we don't have that's clear in the current statutory authority is we have it for meat products. We don't necessarily have it for other products like dairy, milk, other products that the animal may have been exposed to. So the only thing we're asking for is if an animal is to eat something like a pesticide or some other product that could be contaminating their milk or other product that is for human consumption, that we have that same ability to quarantine the animal until we know more. So we think it's very simple, but important. And arguably we could take that authority already, but it's always better to have clear authority than to have implied authority.
So I could characterize this, Steve, as clarity and not necessarily an additional amount of authority. Would that be correct?
I think so. I mean, I think given the overriding scope, the importance of protecting people, the whole point of quarantine is to protect people. So arguably we already have the implied authority, but given that the other things are express, whenever you have express things in a statute, when something's not in it, there's the argument we don't have the authority. So I think it's much better to have it be clear. I also think that if we believe that an animal's milk was adulterated, we would want to take action even under our current authority and would presume that we have it, but it's better for it to be expressed.
Understood, thank you.
Yeah.
And so if we ran into an issue like Maine did a couple of years ago where the animal's milk was found to have, cow's milk had chemicals in it when they tested it because of the ground feed was contaminated. Is that where something like this could come into play?
Potentially, I think this again covers quarantining animals, not the food itself. The idea here is to keep the animal separate and not to allow it to be consumed. Once it becomes a food product, so once you milk your cow and milk's in the processor, there are different rules about the food safety that applies.
Yeah.
So this is very much related to that. If we had a reason to believe that any animal had consumed anything that was going to make the milk product or any other product unsafe to eat, we could quarantine that animal. But then once it gets into production, there are different food safety standards that apply. But I think you're referencing PFAS or some of the different elements. Huge concern for, I think, the entire country, world, state about how to regulate that. This is not targeting that, but it could be, certainly if we had reason, there are certain PFAS chemicals that are known to be problematic. There's thousands more that we know very little about. But if we knew, as an example, that an animal had consumed a large amount of PFOA, which we know is one of those chemicals, but we know it to be problematic, then yeah, arguably this provision could allow us to quarantine the animal until we got more guidance on whether or not that PFOA would impact the animal's products.
And I don't know if this is the right time to ask the question, but years back, we had some communities that spread their dried waste from their sewage treatment plants onto farmland. And a dairy cow will run quite a lot through their body, but as we transition to more and more actual small veggie producers, is there any testing done at the agency on vegetables of any type to see if any of these things are showing up in our one?
That's a great question. Without reason to believe there's a problem, we don't do any inspections right now to test for PFAS generally.
Yeah.
We are doing some sampling from voluntary sampling for farmers to try to help them assess what their current standards are. One of the real problems with PFAS in general is there are no standards. So other than in drinking water, there's a drinking water standard that's basically zero now and even below detectable limits that the EPA recently put out. There are no established standards for food, for a lot of other products. So it's really difficult to regulate in that space. From my perspective, one huge problem is all of these chemicals continue to be made, not all of them, but almost all of them. So we keep pumping them out there and people are trying to deal with what happens at the end. That's a pretty ineffective solution when you continue to contribute to the problem. And I think one of the things we're really struggling with is where are they? Most people seem to think they're most everywhere. And if they're most everywhere, if you start discreetly regulating, you may be not helping in any way the underlying problem, which is the health risk. And then to a large extent, we don't even know what the health risk is. So it's a huge problem, but understanding its scope or what to do about it is beyond my capacity for sure.
Brian?
The only little anecdotal thing, when we found PFAS in our community in the drinking water, I remember, I don't know if it was Ag or DEC came down and said, I think they said that, they're starting to find that it can travel into tubular veggies, so they were starting to find it, I think, in certain kinds of vegetables that were growing, but I don't know the
We
details.
did.
Yeah, they were finding it, or there was either they likely could or something. There was some kind of comment out there because the big question was, people had been using this water to spray farm fields, for years, spray their vegetables. And there was some concern, maybe it was Department of Health, that it could grow up into like potatoes and certain things like that.
There's no doubt that PFAS gets into the food supply.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
can do that in a variety of ways, including, I think, through the roots of produce and also in animal feed and be consumed. It's in all of us.
Yeah.
It gets into the food supply. I think certain types of, I'm no expert by any stretch,
Yeah.
but it's more easily taken by certain foods than others, but you're right. I mean, these are big threshold questions. We're trying to figure it out. We're worried about creating unfair impacts to people by regulating them without knowing the bigger scope.
I just have a
Because-
quick follow-up.
Yeah.
So there's no testing of milk though for PFAS, or is there that we know of?
EB, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but no, there isn't any standard testing. I do believe that there was a reason to believe that milk was adulterated.
Yeah.
Then we have the capacity to investigate, certain milk to inspect to see if it was causing harm. Again, there's no thresholds for
Right.
PFAS,
Right.
but there are thresholds for a couple of the targeted chemicals. So is that about right, EB? Yeah.
EB Flori, Theory Section Chief, Food Safety, Consumer Protection Director. So the only time we have tested is if there was a genuine concern of adulteration that was reported. And so in that case, like, we would collect samples officially and have them tested and then work with mitigation from there. But there isn't a pilot sample surveillance program currently going on. There's been a lot of grappling within the states of, this is a concern, we want consumers to be safe, but once you pick an item to test for it, what about all the other items that we're consuming? And so it turns into
Unlimited,
you think
yeah.
milk is the problem, and it's not, it's could be everything.
Yeah.
And so the EPA coming out with a standard for the drinking water was a really big deal.
Yeah.
Because for a very long time, there wasn't any standard, and so that's like a point to move forward from. But it is, as Steve said, a national concern. So our lab has the capacity, if we had concerns or reports of an issue or saw soil samples high, that we could run this sample, but we're not voluntarily going out and pulling samples.
We could set our own standard. Is that accurate? Because we did for drinking water, if we want, yeah. But I think your point's a good one. It's ubiquitous. It is in everything. Yeah.
I think if you set a standard for one food item, you would need to do it for every food item,
Yeah.
which then gets into consumption, who's consuming it. I mean, just for dairy alone, there's a difference between ice cream consumption and infant formula. And
Yeah.
what are the ages, what are the risks and things like that. So it gets complicated
Yeah.
very quickly.
We all acknowledge ice cream is more
I eat a
important.
lot of ice cream myself, so I might be in the higher bracket if that was broken out of consumption, so.
And yesterday, I think we were told there's only one community that's still spreading
Yeah.
sludge on land in the state. So, I think we get rid of that one, we'll be sludge free on
It's a good
fields
step.
or on land. And because we do have a pretty good reputation of growing great products here in Vermont and freshness and all that. And so we want to be sure and stay ahead of, maintain our good record.
Agreed,
Yeah.
agreed.
Is that something that could be added to this bill, or should we make it separate? How do we get rid of the last sludge users and not encourage other people to use it?
I think we could we need to get DEC in or somebody from that agency.
Okay,
Because natural resources too busy working on the clean heat standards and stuff like that too.
So we're doing
Yeah,
a
to
little
worry
favor.
about whether or not we're gonna get rid of sludge on fields and not be able to eat or drink the products that come from it, so.
Sounds good.
We'll invite someone in. so-
Thank you.
You're a good man. You're a good man. Taking that off of Senator Bray's list.
Wow, I mean, they're very.
He's always looking out.
He's always looking out. Just put in a resolution for Bobby. Just as a general thank you for everything.
Well, I don't want anybody to overwork, you know.
See, now I'm glad the camera's on the back of my head.
Yeah, you are getting a little red. It doesn't faze me in the least. Hey, go ahead.
Should I go on to the egg changes?
Sure.
So this, just to back up for a second, there's a lot of language here. It's really not doing very much of anything in our opinion, except giving us a regulatory program that's actually viable. The one that exists was written a long time ago. It's a little unclear when it all came to being, but most of it is from 1973. The program really only permits us to regulate what you call an egg. Like there are certain terms about fresh or candling. It gives us the authority to regulate whether you call an egg, and it has to be at least a grade A egg. And it gives us authority over containers. That's it. And then if we find a violation of what you're calling an egg, you're not labeling it correctly, essentially, or you're putting it in the wrong container, we can refer that to the state's attorney, presumably for criminal prosecution, which is an old method of enforcing food safety laws that we no longer utilize. It also gives us the ability and actually requires us to either give a minimum penalty for a violation. So there's actual minimum penalty, which we never do. We don't penalize somebody as a first instance unless it's a significant violation. But this sets up a rubric of a minimum and maximum penalty, very small amounts. I think it's $50 and $100, or maybe, and then it goes up to maybe 100 and 500. But the bottom line is this system, Tucker Diego in our office works on egg regulation. He does not have the capacity to spend very much time on it, but he does. One of his jobs is to evaluate whether eggs are meeting the thresholds. So he proposed some language changes, and when looking at it, just the whole system isn't set up for our current practices. So all we're trying to do is get this egg program in line with our other food safety programs, so that if the most important thing happens is somebody is selling eggs that are unsafe to eat, we can actually do something about it. So instead of just having this be about labeling, we ask for a few things, which is to make it clear that if you advertise or label eggs in a false or misleading manner, that's something that we can address. If you sell, offer, or deliver or donate eggs that do not meet the requirements of the law, that's something we can address. That's really that's sort of duplicative language, but it's good to have it in there. And then finally, and most importantly, that if you're selling adulterated eggs, that we can step in. So the point is just to update to target the most important issue, which is safe eggs. So the other pieces of it are all about due process protections. You know, we have a certain administrative enforcement structure that the legislature created, and we apply it throughout all of our programs. There's a penalty structure. There's a due process structure for hearings to make sure that we tell somebody what we think that they did wrong, make sure they have an opportunity to contest that, make sure they have an opportunity to be heard and present evidence. So that's the structure we use throughout our programs, which is the one that is in statute that you all gave us. It just is not right now being used for the egg program. So we're just trying to update this so that we use the same methods for eggs that we do for everything else. And so I think there maybe was some confusion because the penalty section is next, and there's no linkage between the penalty section and the eggs. It's just that we wanted to update the egg language to make it modern. The penalty section is a different issue, which we'll talk about in a second. But
That was my confusion, so thank you.
yeah, no, absolutely.
But you did mention that there are egg penalties.
There are.
I don't see them in that section, so that's fine.
No, you're right. The penalty, we are asking to strike the old penalty section, which creates that minimum and maximum that I talked about. And I'm looking now at a maximum of 100 and not a minimum of $25 for a first offense. And then 500 maximum and not less than 50 for each subsequent offense. We are asking to change that, to repeal it, and to instead utilize the standard agency penalty structure. So unless in some statutes, there are other specific amounts that are enumerated, like for water quality right now, this for each offense, the maximum is $5,000 or the total is $50,000. Whenever there's not something specified, then this agency standard right now is a maximum of $1,000 for each offense, or a total of $25,000 for the total amount of violations for an offender. So yes, what we were asking for is to take away this old structure and allow us to use the existing agency structure, which right now is 1,000 maximum or 25,000 maximum.
And move that to 5 and 50.
That's in the next section, which we're also requesting. Yeah, which obviously warrants some discussion, but. Are there questions about the eggs in general, or?
Well, just, you know, I don't really look very often, but if you do look at a carton, it'll say grade A eggs.
Yeah.
And is there grade B eggs? Or C, or?
No, you have- It has Kristen Haas, Agency of Agriculture, to sell at retail, it has to be grade A. That's the minimum standard for, so if there are substandard eggs, those should not be making it to a retail outlet for sales or whatever.
We call those the Halloween eggs.
Old, or you mean, how does an egg get, a smaller egg, or how do you get to a substandard egg?
Damaged or shell issues, that there shouldn't be obvious defects in the egg, but when you think of other,
Not clean.
yeah, less sanitary, obvious signs of the egg being insanitary, so cleanliness and wholeness.
Yeah.
really
USDA
constitute it.
requires the eggs to be clean, so they don't have to be refrigerated to be for sale. So people are like, they shouldn't have waste on them, they shouldn't have cracks and damage, they should
Oh,
be
yeah.
cleaned and things like that.
So if you see a normal, good-looking egg, it by definition is a grade A. A grade A.
Well, usually on the little carton, it'll say
Yeah.
12, grade
Jumbo
A
or whatever.
eggs. And I said, well, I don't really want to pay that price. I'll take a grade B egg. No, you gotta buy the grade A at $7 a dozen.
Unless you go to the farm.
You could
And
buy
then-
your own
yeah.
chickens and then have your own grade.
And it probably cost me $12
It's
a
probably-
dozen.
Probably.
Right.
Yeah. Did someone yesterday or sometime raise a question on page 4, line 4, the main?
That was me.
Yeah.
That was you? Do you still have that question?
No, Steve Collier did an excellent job answering it.
Okay, we're good to go. Yeah, we'll move on then. I had some questions on the administrative penalties. And when was the last time, how long's the fine been at 1,025? And does the 5 and 50 correspond with the length of time since those penalties have been changed?
That's a great question. And I can't tell you when the $1,000 was initiated. I know it's been in place since at least 1989. That is, I believe that's when the provision that established the $1,000 was first enacted, but I don't know what was in place before that. So since at least 1989, it's been $1,000. And that's just because my online research database doesn't allow me to go back to the statutes before 1989. So obviously with a library that could be found. I was wondering if Mike O'Grady, because I think you may have asked him to look into it too, and I don't know if he's had a chance to, but in 1989, the structure was 1,000 and 10,000. And so at some point you increase from 10,000 maximum for total penalty to $25,000. I don't know exactly when that is. That would be easy to find out. But if the $1,000 is from our perspective is probably the biggest problem with the current structure. And I quickly looked online just to look at what inflation has done, and $1,000, it's basically inflation has gone up about 2.5 times since 1989. So if you had so right now, if we have $1,000 penalty now, that would be equivalent to $400 in 1989. Or stated another way, a $1989 is now worth about $246. So just by the nature of 30 plus years of inflation, we more than have the penalty authority that we used to have in 1989. But the bigger impetus for the request is that we've had some issues where, especially with some bigger national retailers who we regulate, that it's cheaper to pay our maximum penalties than it is to correct the practice. And that's where the real impetus for this comes from. You know, Teddy Roosevelt talked about speaking softly and carrying a big stick. We speak softly, I think, really well. For some of these folks, we're now armed with a twig. we $1,000 for a major retailer to pay. It's a lot, frankly, if you're charging the wrong prices, it's cheaper to pay the penalty than it is to fix the structural problems that cause the wrong prices. And our whole idea about enforcement is we don't want to ever impose penalties. That's not what we're here to do. Sometimes it's the only way we can get people to correct practices. But if we don't have a deterrent that's effective in correcting those practices, then we're basically impotent to effectuate the changes. So what we're asking for is enough authority so that if people won't listen to us, then perhaps we have a little better chance of catching their attention. And that's
what type of policy or what type of a product can you think of any offhand that would, where you run into this, a particular item where you needed to, or you should have been, felt you should have been able to charge more of a penalty for the violation? Or
I think that where this really comes from is that with some of our retail scanning investigations, so one of the things our weights and measures folks do is they evaluate whether accurate prices are being charged. And if what we do is we can impose a penalty, you know, obviously we look at someone's track record, we look at the number of violations, we look at whether or not it's continuing. But with some chains, we've had some problem where we keep finding violations, we keep issuing them the penalties and they pay them, but when we go back, nothing is improved. And so that's just not a great way to operate for anyone. We're not able to protect the consumer if we're not able to exact enough leverage to actually get someone to comply. So that's what it comes from. But there are, you know, the other piece of this is we're trying to create some uniformity in our agency too. So our water quality program is able to have a $5,000 penalty or up to $50,000 penalty. We don't, keep in mind, these are maximums. We don't ever start with a maximum unless someone has done something particularly egregious. But as an example, if someone was knowingly selling milk that they knew had a pathogen and they were doing that, you know, intentionally, that's a pretty big deal. Somebody could get sick. Somebody could even potentially die. Somebody was passing a product with listeria knowingly. $5,000 is not a lot for that kind of a penalty. I don't anticipate us having that problem, but the idea is really just to have an enforcement structure that can be effective in the worst cases. And if you don't have an enforcement structure that's effective in the worst cases, you don't have much of an enforcement structure. We don't like to use our maximum penalties that we have now. And I'm not heavily involved in the day-to-day enforcement, but I can only think of a very small number of times when we've ever used our current maximum penalties. That's not our style, frankly. We like to get people to comply. We like to educate, get them to do the right thing, because ultimately, if they're not doing the right thing, that's not good for us. It's not good for them. It's not good for the society. So the idea is to bring them along. But once in a while, some people, no matter what you do, will not listen. And so when you get to that part, you've got to have enforcement that's either effective or you keep going until you either get compliance or ultimately, put them out of business if they refuse to do things the correct way.
So the scanners, the per unit price on the shelf, the scanners are different than the unit price.
Those are two different things. Unit pricing is a requirement and Mark Paquette would be the person if you really want to get into the details, but the scanning violations is where I understand we've had the biggest problem with people being repeatedly found in violation and not correcting it.
But if the scanner price, it's got to be compared to some price. What is it? It isn't the unit price on the shelf. You see $2.98 on the shelf. You get up to the cash register and run it through, and it's $3.99 or.
So the scan.
How do you check the scanner?
So the scanner is the retail price. So unit pricing means that you're supposed to break out your price by a unit of measure. So for example, you look at something by per ounce, like a per ounce rate, so that you can, if you have two bottles and one's a 32 ounce one and one's a 16 ounce one, and they're sitting next to each other on the shelf, you can look at the ounce rate to see which is actually better priced by volume.
Right.
So that's what unit pricing is about, is being able to compare different products. But the retail price is what the scanner does. So when you scan something, you're not, unit price may come up, I don't know, but that's not the point of the scanner check. It's the retail.
The whole price has got to be somewhere, because how do you know that the scanner's off?
Correct. And it's that there's a retail price, so something might be 99 cents, but then the unit price of that might be, 10 cents per ounce. And so it's the retail scanner is recording the 99-cent retail price, and that's the one we're checking to see if that's
So
right.
I had the wrong question. I asked you about unit price, and it should have been the retail price.
If I'm even using the right word for that, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the examples too, Kristen Haas, Agency of Agriculture, that Mark Paquette, our Weights and Measures program lead, has given me in the past, and it's been helpful, is sales, sale prices that are posted at the point of sale of the product.
Yeah.
If they do not match the scan price, that's an example of a discrepancy that we see some. It does happen.
That
So.
could add up to a lot of money in a week's time.
Mhm.
It sure can. And
Yeah, so if I could, I think it must have happened to all of us at one time where you see a price, it's on sale. Somehow you remember that when you get to the cash out place, and then they ring it up and you look and you say, this isn't what it said over there. And at that point, for the most part, the person that's checking you out will get someone else to run back to make sure that nothing's amiss.
Right.
Does that trigger some sort of investigation on the ag agency's part, or she'll fix it, or he will fix it at the moment, but that doesn't mean that the problem is fixed, right?
correct. And the answer is no, unless either that customer calls us to tell us about it, or if the store, which I think would be unlikely, called us to tell us about it. Ideally, it prompts the store to fix the problem, but no, we don't know about that unless somebody calls us to complain. What we do though is we have an inspection schedule where I don't know how Mark Paquette, who's our program chief, sets it up, but his team evaluates, does random inspections. We'll also respond to complaints. We'll also, I believe, if we know that somebody is not doing it properly, might put those people on a more rigorous inspection schedule to see how they're doing.
I think most people, that wouldn't get on my top 5 list of things to do today would be to call the agency and
No.
say, hey, by the way,
No,
I bought a toothbrush and, you know, they were trying to get me for 50 cents. I mean, it wouldn't happen.
no,
But I've run into this, you know, like everybody. And the clerk will usually say, well, they told us to put that stuff on sale, but the office never changed. We can't change our cash register price. They never changed it, wherever that comes from. They electronically, they do the pricing in Timbuktu, but the store's in Troy. And
I think they download all most places, I think, download all the new prices in their cashier system, their scanning system. And then what sometimes happens is the shelf prices don't match or don't get matched immediately. And I'm sure there are other errors too, but there's not always necessarily a synchronicity between the scanning prices and the shelf prices, which is obviously important.
And so I find these have everybody having a device on them, it really handy because you go back to the shelf, because of course I don't have any staff now to send back to the shelf. So I just say, excuse me, I'm gonna go take a picture of it. So I go back to the shelf, show them the picture, and they're like, oh, yes, I have to take off 99 cents. So for me, like self-serving with my camera is the way around that.
I gotta take you shopping with me.
You should. And you know, they're always very apologetic because yeah, it's just one of those hiccups and they want to keep me happy as a customer. Like they want to keep everybody happy. So
yeah,
Yeah,
They did
Well,
really-
that works.
that's a good.
any other questions where we are?
No, thanks.
Section 7, any questions on that? Do you have any comment on?
If I could just very briefly explain it, the only thing that we're trying to do here is, so this program is obviously designed to help us mitigate environmental impacts of agriculture across the board. One way we want to do that is by addressing greenhouse gases. The current language only allows us to do that by decreasing emissions, where we think that the bigger gains in agriculture are really from mitigating the impacts, meaning sequestration of carbon. So we just want to make the program more inclusive so that we can both target, mitigation includes both emission reduction and also sequestration. So we think that's the answer moving forward. There are many real positive farm practices can have incredible environmental benefits as well as detriments. And so we want to be able to both address the benefits and the negatives. So it's just to give more flexibility to that granting program, which is a really important program to helping farmers do even more for our community and environment.
Brian?
The only note that I have here was that this request was made last year but wasn't included. Do you know anything about that? I don't know,
I don't,
but it doesn't really matter. I was just curious if there was some pickup along the way.
I don't think that's right. This
Okay.
language was modified. I don't remember exactly for what, but I don't believe, I may be wrong, but I don't
Yeah, I
believe
don't
we
know,
made
yeah.
this specific request.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, okay. And I don't, keeping in mind the Global Warming Solutions Act addresses emission reduction. When it uses the term mitigate, it defines it to mean both decreasing emissions and sequestering carbon. So I don't think there's anything about this that wouldn't be in line with the state's objectives, which is to mitigate greenhouse gases. Yes. Yeah.
Anything else, Brian?
No, that was it. That was it. Yeah.
Looks good.
Section 8.
Yeah, so this last one is sort of interesting. So farms have to manage their own stormwater in accordance with the required agricultural practices. Stormwater that's in their production area, they have to manage proactively because it has waste in it. So it's presumed that if stormwater is going through your production area, so where you actually have your feed or your animals, you're actually right near the barnyard essentially, that water is going to be managed and then it's often put into pits or diverted and then land applied. So farms already have this responsibility to manage stormwater in their production areas, and they're required to use field practices to appropriately spread waste on their fields so that the stormwater that comes off their fields is presumed not to have any waste in it. So farms are regulated, the point is, by the Agency of Agriculture, including their stormwater. Because of that, the Agency of Natural Resources, which otherwise regulates stormwater, does not have stormwater fees for farms. And that's explicit in statute that the Secretary of Natural Resources does not regulate farm stormwater for operation. They do for construction. So if a farm is building something, then they have to get a permit from the Agency of Natural Resources for their stormwater, but they don't for operation because we already regulate that. So that's the lay of the land. We've talked with the Agency of Natural Resources about this. Everyone's comfortable with how that works. What's happening here is that some municipalities have the authority to regulate stormwater in their towns instead of the Agency of Natural Resources. So they have the ability, if they're willing to take on all stormwater management, they can do it instead of the Agency of Natural Resources. That's their option. The town can. So some towns are doing that. They create a utility that regulates stormwater and they have user fees. Some of those towns who've been doing that have been charging farms for their stormwater. So I personally don't think they probably legally can really do that right now, because the statutory authority that they have, and that's the section you have right in front of you here under 24 VSA 4414.9, says if they're going to take this responsibility, they have to do it in a way that's consistent with the Agency of Natural Resources. So I think there's a good argument. The exemption for farms is clear in statute for the Agency of Natural Resources. My personal belief is that if the towns are going to be doing it, they should be doing it the same way that the Agency of Natural Resources does it. Since the Agency of Natural Resources can't charge farms, we don't think that municipalities should be charging them either. But there is some ambiguity in the word consistent. We know some towns have been charging farms. Some farms have been charged over $1,000 for an annual fee for their stormwater management. Farms can't use municipal stormwater techniques. So municipalities who have these utilities are diverting their stormwater in ways that farms can't utilize. So basically farms get no benefit from belonging to a municipal stormwater utility. They have to comply with our practices or they're subject to penalty. And so they're paying a fee that they wouldn't have to pay to ANR, that we don't think towns should be properly imposing. And I have no reason to believe any towns are doing this intentionally or that they're even aware of this issue. It's just like we feel that there ought to be a statutory clarification to make it clear that if towns are going to assume this responsibility, they're not doubly charging farms who already have to manage their stormwater.
I can't imagine why a town though would go a mile out into the countryside. And is that when they construct a new building or when do they charge this, or how do they get to the point to charge it?
I don't know exactly how it works. I think what they're doing is setting up a utility and then they're charging a user fee. My assumption is for every resident in the community, probably based on their acreage or something. So I don't know how they do it, but just like when you have access to public water, you get charged based on your consumption. And so they're somehow figuring out how to charge. I assume it's by land area, but I don't know. But we do know that farms have been calling us to complain because they're getting charged by their towns. So there's some sort of user fee that the towns are setting up, which makes sense when you have a utility. You have electricity, you have water, you set up a utility. Everybody who utilizes that utility pays for it. But in this case, towns can't utilize it. They have to have their own system. So they're not benefiting from it. And I personally don't think that towns should be imposing this fee given the current legal framework. But I understand how it could happen, whether it's intentional or inadvertent, I don't know, but we're asking that it be
Got
fixed.
to be a little loophole there
Yeah,
that
exactly.
some town administrator figured out, well, we can make 20 grand if we do this.
Could be.
Because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because you guys, I mean, farms have a runoff, they get in big trouble. You know, whether it's from the bunker or, I mean, it all has to be rooted to usually the manure pit, right?
Well, they have to follow all of the land management practices that we have, which can vary depending on the area and what's set in place. And if they don't do that, we can penalize them. And then also if they have what's called a point source discharge, which they can have if they're not following all the right practices, then A&R can also step in.
Yeah.
So there's significant regulation already on their practices. And this is really just a fee that they can't benefit from, that we think that since they have to pay so much already to meet the requirements, it seems like they're paying twice for something instead of once.
Do you have to pay on your egg farm?
Now,
Are they grade A?
how dare you even ask?
I don't think green eggs can be grade A.
Green, blue, I'm gonna bring you a dozen.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know about this. I know that, I thought Karen was gonna say, well, maybe she's there. Oh, yeah, there she is. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't understand why.
oh,
This whole thing.
oh, Karen is on, so we can ask her, yeah. Karen, welcome, good to see you. Do you have a comment in regards to this section?
Yeah, thank you for asking me. So there are a few towns that do charge stormwater utility fees to farms. I don't know if they all do, but I did want to give you a little bit of background. So generally speaking, the towns that have adopted stormwater utilities are using the funding to pay for water quality improvements to reduce pollutants from municipally owned impervious surfaces. Those are surfaces that all the taxpayers in the community own. And particularly addressing drainage networks that serve public roadways, and our obligation under the Municipal Roads General Permit is to fix all vulnerabilities in the road networks in the municipalities, vulnerabilities being those areas in the road where stormwater runs off or contributes to erosion, runs into the streams and contributes to the phosphorus loads in our lakes. So it's not designed to address the individual practices that a farm would need to put in place to manage their particular land. It's the money that's collected by the municipalities to pay for the municipally owned infrastructure, and the mandates from the legislature, which has determined that stormwater is a top priority for the state. That's largely because of the Lake Champlain total maximum daily load that was the subject of so much controversy not that long ago. So I did want to just mention to you that in South Burlington, for instance, the city spends about $3 million per year on stormwater management, and about 1.5 million of that is in capital expenditures, so stormwater mitigation measures on the ground. In Burlington, I know these are communities that this committee is super sympathetic to, but I'm going to tell you anyway. In Burlington, their annual MS4 annual report, which is municipal stormwater separation sewer, there's one other S there, report. They spent 1.2 million in FY19, 1.4 million in FY20, and 1.8 million in FY21, again, on stormwater mitigation measures related to municipally owned roads and infrastructure. And then in Williston, it was 770,000 in FY '23. And in Colchester was about $1 million a year that they spend on that. So the idea is that everybody's in, everybody pays in to, they pay a fee that contributes to the ability of the towns to put those measures in place. And if they didn't pay that fee, it's on the property tax pay base, right? If you didn't have that kind of utility fee, and a lot of towns have chosen to go that route also. So that's just a little bit of the background. We would be concerned if farms in particular were exempted. Everybody wants to be exempted from stormwater utility fees, and everyone has a good reason. If you have a property that's 3 acres, now you have to put stormwater mitigation measures in place, and that costs you. So that's just the background, and I wanted to make sure that the committee understood that. I did send to you, Linda said she posted the Clean Water Report for FY '22, which is state and federal investments, and says there that it's been 337 million in clean water projects since 2016. I mean, our commitment to clean water in Vermont is significant, and we know that farms a big piece of that. The report also itemizes the investments made for and by farms, so it might be of interest to you. And then lastly, I would just suggest that you have the Agency of Natural Resources in to comment on this provision. I'm happy to.
Yeah, how many farms do you have in Burlington?
Well, I don't know, but you have, I don't know, you might know, but you do have,
Out of-
Well,
Centerville.
interestingly, Burlington exempted farms in their stormwater utility.
What about, South Burlington or Williston? Williston, you might have some in Colchester.
yeah, you, I don't know the number, Senator, but Williston and Colchester do assess the farms for the stormwater utility payments. Again, the idea being all in. And I don't know about South Burlington. I know what they spend, but not if they exempt farms.
Brian?
Did you mention that you talked with ANR and that they?
No,
No, I'm sorry, Karen, our attorney, I thought said he had spoken with ANR and ANR approved this.
We did talk with ANR when we talked with the administration about this.
Yeah.
They were supportive of this. I just talked to them yesterday about something else and brought this up, and I just shared this language with them yesterday. But they were, when we talked earlier, they were supportive of the concept. And I've asked them if they have any thoughts on the language, but I have not yet heard back. And I did, Karen, I apologize. I intended to reach out to you to discuss this, and it fell off my plate. And I did want to talk to you about this before, and I apologize for not doing that. Still happy to do so, though.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Karen, when did the charges, if you will, begin to farms with this issue? In other words, is it a year ago we started doing this, or 2 years, or 3 years? And does the contribution that's coming from those farms decrease the payment others are paying?
So there's not a single date on which this started, although I would say it's several years in the past now, because municipalities adopted stormwater utilities at different points in time. I think Southampton may have been the first municipality to adopt a stormwater utility. And actually, Burlington, to my knowledge, doesn't have anything called a utility yet, but their program functions in the same way. So So it's been several years for all those communities, but they didn't all start at the same time.
Okay, and what about the proportion of the farm contribution, if you will, to the total? How does that really affect people in terms of taxes?
Well, if you don't have a stormwater utility and you don't have another way to assess property owners for the to help pay for the cost of municipal infrastructure and municipal practices that are required by the agency, then that falls back on the property taxpayer, which is the same person, right? But we always talk about these different pockets, but it's all your pocket. So
Agreed.
that is something to keep in mind, but the municipalities that have gone this route have made the determination that it's more equitable to address stormwater separately from just putting it into the general budget where it goes back to the property taxpayers. Does that help?
To some degree, yeah.
On your report on the federal government, how much they sent our way, how much do the towns and cities get of that federal money to deal with the stormwater?
So a lot of the federal, I'll have to go back and look, but a lot of the federal dollars that come through to municipalities actually come in the form of loans through the capital budget. So I would need to differentiate there in terms of what's actually comes through as loans and what comes through as grants. There are also grants through the capital budget that go to municipalities for municipal infrastructure. You may have heard from your municipal constituents about the increasing costs related to the municipal roads general permit, which every town in the state is required to comply with.
Well, what I'm hearing from my towns is that they get money from the state to ditch and stone their ditches and fix the embankments and you know, they aren't out taxing the farmers that live miles from the municipality or live along those roads that they're getting state money to fix anyways. They aren't charging them more money.
So every municipality has these projects. Pretty much every municipality has these projects where you have to do exactly that, stone in your ditches and the regrade for erosion control and those kinds of things. You've seen those projects. The agency does provide grants for that, but it doesn't have the resources to provide all the funding that's needed to make those improvements. And that's actually another issue that we're hoping to address this year. So some of it is paid for by the taxpayers.
Well, any other questions or?
No, that was helpful, thanks.
No. Well, thank you for being with us. We have no more questions. Joe, did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, real brief, not to take up too much of your time. Joe Duncan, I'm the president with Green Mountain Water Environment Association. We are the entities that represent the operators of water, wastewater, and stormwater systems in Vermont, including the towns that Karen referenced. And the big piece here, I guess the takeaway that I want to have pointed out is there really is no desire to try and regulate the farms, because that is covered under the Agency of Agriculture and has already been defined through the state of Vermont. So when we're talking about what the municipalities are doing here for this, it's exactly what Karen said. Everybody uses the roads. There are a variety of sources that come forward to allow for addressing stormwater within a community, but it's basically an all-in approach that says, in order to support the network of systems that deal with discharges that ultimately make their way to the waters of the state, particularly the waters of the community in Lake Champlain, mostly for the folks in the areas that were referenced. They've developed a stormwater utility, and that utility charges based on the amount of typically impervious surface that a community has. Just so you're aware, some of the other MS4 communities that are out there are St. Albans Town, St. Albans City, Rutland Town, Rutland City. It's based upon the amount of urbanization that's there. But ultimately, I think somewhere down the road, that concept of stormwater utility was born out of the MS4s, which mostly Chittenden County, but like I said, also St. Albans and Rutland. Somewhere down the line, I think that mentality will make its way out, because right now, stormwater is becoming more and more prominent. We just happen to be focusing on Lake Champlain right now. There are other water bodies that will be implemented down the line. I bet you've talked with ANR as rules get tighter and tighter. So this is really just an all-in means of saying we need to be paying for this. Everybody's a member of this community. Let's collect the revenue proportionately from everybody. It's not saying, hey, you're regulated by the ag, so you're already paying for your stormwater practices. That's great. I'm paying for my stormwater practices, my homeowners association, but I'm paying money for projects that go on around the town of Williston that I live in. So to me, it's an all-in attitude. So I just wanted to share that perspective with you. Thank you.
For Joe.
No, makes sense to me.
Catherine, are you with us?
Caitlin,
Lorraine?
I emailed Julie. I think.
Yes. Yes, I'm here. For some reason, my video won't start. There we go. E?
Well,
you were there for a second.
you were with us, now you're with us. Hi. So did you want to comment in regards to the issue at hand?
No, I was just here as part of the animal health team in case there were additional questions about any of the topics we brought up.
Oh, she was you guys. Okay, yeah, thank you. Any other questions in regards to this? If not, Stephen, do you have anything else to add?
No, on the stormwater issue, I'd just say I understand what the league is saying and what was just articulated. I don't know how the fee is being implemented exactly, but to the extent that it's looking at a farm's impervious surfaces and charging for them for that, it still seems to be a double charge. I don't know how that's all broken down. I still am a little bit confused about how the towns can exercise only the authority that the state of Vermont does through the Agency of Natural Resources, but be able to essentially tax services that the state can't. So I still think there's a disconnect there. It may require a little more exploration. In other words, if ANR is managing stormwater, they can't charge the farms, but some of the towns are. So that's not consistent. If the state can't do it, but the town can take over the state's role, but then charge a fee that the state can't charge. So that means some farms where the state is in charge of stormwater are not being charged, whereas other farms in towns where the towns are doing stormwater are being charged. I don't think that was ever intended by this structure. It might require a little more digging into seeing what part is municipal infrastructure and what part is private landowner infrastructure.
Does that basically come because the community may have a charter?
That's a great question, Senator. I don't think so. I think that the towns are assuming this stormwater authority because of the state statutory role. It is in state statute in Title 24 that towns can, in lieu of ANR, that they can assume this authority. So I don't, I don't think it's a charter issue. I think it's that state statutory issue, but there may also be charter grants. I'm not certain of that.
Ryan?
Can we hear from the Agency of Natural Resources on this?
Karen also has got it.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, thanks.
Karen, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, I did just want to follow up on that last comment. It is not related to municipality's governance charter. It is the state statute that allows a town or city to adopt a stormwater utility. And actually, a few years ago, the Agency of Natural Resources was really pushing towns to do exactly that.
So Karen, one last question I have is, you tax every resident, every property owner in these towns like Williston, Colchester, they all get assessed a fee?
Yes, they do.
What if their water runs in a different direction and goes to a different town? They
Well,
live on the other side of the hill, let's say.
Well, you need to have the Agency of Natural Resources in, but the watershed for Lake Champlain is a somewhat stunning 200 plus towns. So all the waters from those towns flow to Lake Champlain.
Yeah, but every town isn't charging this fee. So you could live on the other side of the hill, so the water's running, say, to Winooski instead of to Burlington. Winooski isn't charging the fee, but Burlington is. So, I mean, why is that person that actually lives in Burlington, but their runoff and stormwater goes to Winooski? Something like that.
Yeah, so if you don't have a stormwater utility, you're still obligated to comply with the municipal roads general permit. And the way that those towns raise those fees or raise those monies is through the property tax. So you are paying regardless of which town you're in. But you may be paying to a utility, you may be paying in your tax bill.
Well, Dan, did you have your hand up, or did you have a statement or a question? I see your little hand is up.
Did you say Joe or Dan?
No,
Joe.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so what Karen touched upon it. The utilities that are there are designed to generate revenue specifically for stormwater. If those places that don't have it, they generate that through their tax bill. So essentially what they're doing is they're establishing a specific fund that goes to stormwater pieces. And I guess, Steve, I would look to see in about the regulatory pieces here, and that the idea here is that this fee does not look to charge in any way for the administration of or regulation of activities on farms. Again, it's saying if you are a member of this community, we have a duty to make sure that stormwater is taken care of. And we're going to charge everybody some form of fee, and they'll have different bases for it. But that's the concept that's here. And what I'll say is Champlain Water, I work for Champlain Water District. We are a municipality, and we pay a stormwater fee for any of the properties that we have within any of the communities that charge them, Colchester, Williston, et cetera. So, that's the mindset. And I suppose we could go out and argue, please don't charge us, we're a municipality. But again, if you're a property owner, you're in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
No, thanks.
We'll continue on this section. We have people waiting for our next session, so.
Thank you so much. for
Thanks,
having
Steve.
us.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you.
all
Thanks.
very much. Yeah. So anyways, we'll get back to this. I can understand the municipality. I thought were they talking about impervious surface?
Yeah, just the roads. They're trying to make up for the fact that everybody drives on those roads.
Yeah.
So they're just assessing the fee for everybody because everybody uses the roads. Somewhat equally, right? It's about the road travel. It's about the impervious roads. A municipal road gets business from everybody.
But
even
isn't
the
everybody
tractors.
already paying that with their property tax?
No, not the stormwater utility price. piece.
Why? Huh?
Some towns break it out as a utility
Are we on?
to just show more clearly where those funds are going.
You didn't.
No, we're gonna switch over with different folks, but,
And like
well,
Essex, we don't break it out as a stormwater utility, or we didn't when I was on the select board. It was included in the taxes, but it still went to stormwater.
Yeah.
But these other towns set up utilities to just say, this is stormwater
So they are
money.
paying for it.
No, everybody's paying for the roads, stormwater mitigation,
yeah, but
which is not for paving the roads, it's for the stormwater mitigation for the roads that everybody travels on, just like everybody would pay through the taxes to have the roads paved, right? I mean, it's similar, but
well,
it's,
we'll have the discussion, but
yeah. I think
if
it's
I
interesting.
live in the village and the roads are all tarred, the sidewalks are
Right.
asphalt or concrete.
Right.
I drive to work in the village. I drive to the village to shop. I drive to the village to go to the repair shop. But if I live 4 miles out at the end of the road, I might drive a mile on impervious surfaces, dirt roads, and go to the neighboring town to get my farm equipment fixed. And we already know that on the secondary roads, the state's paying the bill to line the ditch. I mean, I talked with Jay, I talked with Troy, and a lot of small towns, Westfield, Lowell, and they got big grants to cover. But anyway,
Yeah,
we'll
it's a good point. Half the
We'll
roads
have
in Essex
to,
are impervious.
figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, getting back on schedule, about 15 minutes late here, or 20. We have Pat Moulton with us from, used to be VTC, but are you still located there, Pat?
Actually, no, I'm up in Lindenville now. So, and Dr. Graywall is in the president's house at Vermont Tech. So as
Yeah,
it should be. So
well, welcome to the Northeast Kingdom.
it's a pleasure to be here. I will be an NEK resident permanently when I build my house in East Charleston next summer, Senator. So I'll be in your backyard.
Yeah, I guess you will. Quickly, we have 3 new members on the committee, so we'll quickly introduce ourselves and we'll get started.
Yep, Brian Collmore, representing the Rutland District.
Green Runner, Chittenden North, including Fairfax.
Brian Campion, Bennington County. Good to see you both.
Rich Westman, how are you?
Good, good. And Bobby Starr from Orleans. So we're pretty well scattered around the state and want to welcome you folks this morning. So are you gonna lead off?
Yes.
Or
I'm going to lead up.
yeah, and so you could tell us things that are happening at VTC and introduce yourself and we'll go for it.
Yep, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. This is Parvinder Graywall, President for Vermont State University that will start here pretty soon. And currently serving as President for Vermont Technical College, Castleton University, and also Northern Vermont University. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you our progress with the agriculture programs at Vermont Technical College.
Great.
So as you know, please get the slides started. Thank you. As you know, this program has been re-envisioned. Over the last 2 years, there have been many stakeholder meetings and lots of engagement in order to tailor the program to the needs of Vermonters, particularly preparing students or farmers with practical skills in the needed areas. So I'm going to share with you some background of what has happened over the last year or so, and where are we going addressing the needs in the state.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go in too much detail. I have it on the slides.
Yeah, these
But-
are the top level.
Correct. So I would basically say that the stakeholder engagement has been extensive. Many stakeholders have been touched and have been engaged in real meetings or through surveys. And based on their input, and a lot of experts have also been tapped for this work. Patricia Morton, our previous president at Vermont Tech, led all that effort with some very important stakeholders from the state. This is the leadership team that led the process with Pat Morton, Louis Calderwood, Regina Buedler, and Alan Kaler. But then we had a steering committee that actually still meets as an advisory committee. There are several members out of that have now become the advisory committee members. So with their input and the many surveys and many other meetings that they have done, the program has been re-envisioned. Next slide, please. So these teams have been meeting in smaller groups so that they can do a lot more envisioning in terms of what the program should look like. Since the final report has been released in June 2021 of all that work, we have made significant progress since then. The advisory committee it actually meets now quarterly, so that they are kind of reviewing our progress as we move forward. Yeah. New funding has been raised, curriculum has been updated, new internship program is being developed, a meat cutting training lab is in the development phase right now.
And when might that get going, the meat cutting?
So right now we are going through a stage where you kind of look at how much it's going to actually cost. So kind of getting into the engineering plans of the meat cutting lab. The meat cutting director's position has already been posted, and also the center director position has already been posted. So it's going to take us some time. We are going to be looking for additional dollars because the meat cutting lab is not that the money that we have raised, we raised significant amount of money, but still we are a little short on that. So the new program, next slide please, is actually well aligned with the Vermont Agriculture and Food System Strategic Plan. And it will focus on the key elements of that particular strategic plan so that we deliver the right workforce for both businesses as well as for the farms, the food system type businesses. So it's kind of like the whole ecosystem. The next slide, please. So our plan is to have this program that will focus on hands-on learning for the next generation of farmers and food entrepreneurs. The new program or goal is also to enhance enrollment in it. Part of the reason we are re-envisioning was declining enrollment in the program as it was previously set up.
And so you're looking to have 125 full-time students.
Correct. Full-time or part-time, preferably full-time.
Yeah.
But as you know, some of these students
Or
could be
not,
part-time.
but you're gonna work on that over the next 6 years. or
Correct,
so.
correct. And the new program would be, there are two components to it, basically. The first one would be to establish the Center for Agriculture and Food Entrepreneurship that will oversee mostly the applied components of this program. Then there will be a 2-year degree program, associate degree program. The associate degree program would be called Agriculture and Food Entrepreneurship Associate Degree. Through the center, we hope to provide lots of continuing education programs that could be non-credit type learning for people, even the meat cutters and others could be through that continuing education type program. And we will have internship for our students, apprenticeships, so that it's kind of very much on the job learning, kind of practical experiences for students. And we also are retooling the farm or the farm assets that would be used as a laboratory for training, providing the training to our associate degree students.
And what do you have for at the farm? You have animals or gonna have animals or?
We will not have the milking herd, but we would have the animals for students to learn from, and there will be a dairy component in the new program. Like one concentration would be dairy and animal side. The other concentration would be more on the rest of the agriculture business or farm operations.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. The next slide, please.
Start to see no Senator or Pat just had her hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add for you, Dr. Graywell, we are leasing the farm to a neighboring farm. So we have dry cows on the farm that students have access to, and they go right next door to the neighboring farm to work on their milking herd. And as Dr. Graywell pointed out, there's a robust internship plan to embed internships early, starting in the second semester, first year, and then a heavy internship in the second semester, second year. So lots of time on the farm.
Yeah, good.
So as I mentioned previously, there will be two concentrations in this new program. One towards the dairy side, the other towards the rest of the food entrepreneurship type area. And let's keep going here. Next slide, please. We hope to keep what's working. The courses that work well, the experiences that work well, we'll keep them. And we will add new components that need to be added as the stakeholders have suggested, proposed to be added. We will also continue to maintain our 2+2 program in partnership with UVM, and that program provides an opportunity to students to go get the undergraduate degrees as well.
Yeah, do you know, if you don't, maybe Pat does, do we have students this year in 2+2 at VTC?
Yeah, maybe Pat can tell us more clearly. There are several programs that are currently running. There is one program that we are just teaching out so that it could be rebranded and reformatted next. Pat, if you want to answer that question.
Sure, I believe we do have seniors or excuse me, sophomores from last year who are up at UVM this year as a junior. But I do not believe the one student we're teaching out, I do not believe he is a 2+2 student. So there will be a pause until we can re-enroll and get additional students engaged in 2+2.
Yeah.
But another program which is in the forestry area that is growing well, that has a good number of students, and that also has a partnership with UVM.
Well, I got bad news for you on the forestry.
Yeah.
we have people up here that are gonna lock up 50% of our forest land and just let it grow old, you know, like us people. So we're only gonna have half as much forestry as we used to have if that bill makes it. Yeah.
What bill is that?
The houses were,
Yeah. So
but
we,
we'll try to fix that if it comes our way.
okay, thank you, appreciate that. All right, as I mentioned briefly, we would adapt our education model so that it is even more hands-on and practical, but also looking to deliver our education in a way that working professionals can have access. So they don't have to leave exactly.
Yeah.
So they could have hybrid learning, that they could join in the lecture portion of any course from home, from the farm, if they are working there, and then come in for the practical aspects to campus. So it'd be more hybrid approach to expanding. And there would also be short courses, certificates if people do not want to engage in a degree program, but just want to expand or enhance their skill in a particular area. So there will be those small, modules of education that they can achieve. Next slide, please. So this particular 2-year program that has been the biggest focus of this entire re-envisioning program, it will have most of the academic learning, basic learning about the farm operations, that will be in year 1. Year 2 will have 2 internships. One would be introductory internship, while they're also taking some courses. But the last internship would be actually on the farm. So that will cement all their learning that they have, they would be able to apply. And that internship would also be helpful to the farm and or the business in terms of there will be a project required from the student to help that business or the farm. That will be their practical learning, and the faculty will stay engaged with that student.
Yeah, so they'd be
kind of mutually beneficial relationship. So the students gets out of it whatever they need to get out of it, but also whoever is supporting the internship also gets something done, some problem solved or.
Do you already have farms lined up for this?
A number of farms have been, it has been discussed with that. You want to highlight that?
Sure. We had originally done some survey work and identified up to 50 farms and businesses who had interest in hosting interns. And another position that we're hiring is a full-time internship coordinator. And when that individual is on, it will be his or her job to nail down those sites and set up those partnerships. So as Dr. Graywall says, everybody benefits, that it's the student and the host site that see value from this internship. So yes, we believe there is a significant interest that's only gotten more intense since COVID and labor force issues have emerged. So we think that's not going to be a problem.
And the plan would be for the students to live right at the farm?
It depends. The second year, it may be more of a permanent, well, it's going to be a longer internship. The hope is to find internship locations near where students reside. But if not, then either at a dorm facility at one of the Vermont State University campuses, or potentially right out there on the farm if there's worker housing available.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our farm assets, we are also planning to retool them so that they can serve as a better way for these students in the new program learn various skills. So there are several components to this farm, but we are to improve some of the components so that the learning is tailored towards the new program needs.
now the farm, you lease the farm buildings in that area. Does the farmer that leased that is he, can they milk there or is that prohibited?
Correct. No, Matt, Parrish, you want to answer that?
Well, they have their own milking infrastructure that on their own farm, which is literally, I don't know, a tenth of a mile away, which is frankly much more modern and updated than the milking parlor we have on campus. So they're keeping their dry herd in our barn now. And they're not milking on campus because they frankly don't need to. So, but that students are getting that milking experience on their farm. Plus, most of the students coming from a farm, which is not all of them, have a fair amount of milking experience already. But and that's the point. And the program always has brought students to other kinds of farms, organic, with some different types of breeds of cows, et cetera. But they will get that hands-on experience in milking next door.
Yeah. But the leasee is not barred from milking there if they wanted to expand.
Yeah, that would be negotiated as part of the lease if that's a desire that they have. Right now, that has not been expressed. They're leasing cropland and they're leasing the barn. So it's working out actually very well. It's the Savello farm, which is right there in Randolph Center. And as you know, Senator, there are a lot of farms within an easy driving distance of the Vermont Tech campus. And then, of course, tons in and around Vermont, depending on where students are from. So, yep.
Right.
Yeah, Senator, if I may highlight one more thing which is relevant here is the new university, as you heard in a different in the appropriations committee from me, that one of our top priority is to become an community engaged university that becomes a catalyst for rural transformation.
Right.
So this kind of arrangement where student and the farmer or a business person and our students and faculty work together to solve our local problems is going to be the driving force. It's a central component of the new university. So therefore, these students' experiences would be captured towards their degree progress. But at the same time, the goal is that the farmer or the business is helped as well. And it's going to be set up like by design from the university.
That's Brian.
Do you remind me, Mr. President, there's some of these opportunities would be for high school students also.
Right.
So if you're a junior, senior, you want to do dual enrollment or whatever, you can start to get some agriculture, get some farming, get some dairy underneath your belt.
Absolutely.
Great.
In fact, agriculture program would be one of those programs that is well suited for the CTE program collaborations and for high school students, that are engaged in agriculture or even related areas. This is, even compared to our advanced manufacturing engineering programs, this one is even more suited. Then more things could be done in collaboration with high school and CTEs.
Right.
Yeah. I see Maple up there. That's getting to be bigger and bigger every year. Do we do Maple at the college?
Yeah, there is a system set up for maple sugaring. Perhaps you want to explain that a little? Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a pretty good sugar bush on campus and a sugar house, and we're making our own maple syrup. We sell a lot to Sodexo, and we sell a lot retail. I'm a avid Vermont Tech maple syrup buyer myself. Part of the upgrades to the farm include additional taps, some updated tracking equipment, and also an expansion of the sugar house so we can fit more students. Right now, we're doing that and involving students, but it's not embedded in the curriculum. So this becomes another one of those enterprises that students can engage in on Maple, along with the apple orchard and vegetable production. And we're also going to be adding pumpkins to the orchard and trying to make the orchard a bit more of today's type of orchard experience. And those can be student enterprises to maybe set up corn mazes and sales and things of that nature. But our orchard, we do a U-pick every fall, and it's pretty basic. But as you probably know, others are looking for a little more pizzazz in their orchard experience. So that's something we hope to do as well. So, and all of that, same with the beef. We hope to graze beef. That will help produce animals for teaching in the meat cutting lab, and then an ability to sell that beef to Sodexo again to serve in our dining hall and potentially retail. So.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and all of this project is also anchored in the history of Vermont Technical College, because there has been a, once it was called an agriculture college. Next slide, please. So just briefly summarizing that we have made significant progress since the final report of this task force came out. And for the meat cutting lab, you already asked me that question. So here is the bullet on that. We have obtained, funding for the meat cutting lab. We appreciate you supporting us last year with $387,000 on that. That's a seed money that got us started. We did obtain a $2.4 million grant from the federal government. And that grant is not all going to the meat program, because we have to follow the grant guidelines as to what the focus would be, but we package the grant to further the entire program. In fact, the center director and the meat lab director would be hired out of the grant for the first 3 years. So then we will kind of self-sustain thereafter. But in the beginning, that grant is very helpful for us to get this whole program launched. Correct.
Do you have any anticipation on how long a student would have to be in the, say, the meat cutting and processing school to be ready to go to work in the slaughterhouse? Or
Right. So it will depend on the students' prior experience and what their goals are. But Pat, can you explain a little bit about how the curriculum is being structured? There will be, certificate programs, or they could enter in the degree program as well.
Yeah, we're in bad shape for meat cutters.
Right.
Right, and as Dr. Graywall knows, we've been running meat cutting short courses for a number of years, 9 or 10, I understand. And we've been doing that with processing facilities around the state, but they're so busy, they can no longer host us, hence the need for the facility. And the training facility will be available for full-time degreed students, and we're developing certifications at various levels so that students can graduate with varying levels of certifications that can put right to work in a meat cutting facility, as well as continue those short courses for everything from sort of somebody wants to know how to cut up their deer to somebody who does want to work in a facility. We're getting calls literally every week from whether it's City Market or Shaw's Markets or others saying, we really need some help. We want to partner with you to do more of this training. So there's tremendous demand, as you've highlighted, Senator. And so this will be an opportunity for both the full-time students as well as those who come in for these short courses.
Yeah. So in that course, would that take a full year or semester, or do you have any idea, Pat?
I don't know sitting here right now. I think it's probably going to be like a certification could be obtained within a year or within the 2-year degree, recognizing those full-time students are taking a full course load elsewhere. Whereas it might be multiple sessions for a non-matriculated student to come and take that short course. But I do not know that, but I can try to find out for you.
Yeah, we will start the short courses first, because the degree program will take some time recruiting students and all of that, right? But as soon as the meat lab is ready, the curriculum for some of the meat components are already there. So we would be able to offer those to those non-degree seeking students early.
And what about if you're trained to be a meat cutter, could you work in a slaughter facility then to slaughter beef? I mean, I don't know, I would think you could. Do you know, Pat?
Well, the intent is to have these be the finer skills that grocery stores or meat butcher shops would be looking for, less than the slaughter skills, but potentially, yes, depending on the slaughterhouse and how far they take the processing of that carcass.
Brian?
What would it cost? Do we have a sense of what it would cost somebody? Because I don't, we talk a lot about not wanting to take on student debt, and this isn't, you're not going to become super rich doing this work, but we really need you. So what would it cost to get certified in this? Any idea?
Pat, you want to answer that?
That's a good question. It's tied to the earlier question about what the length of time is to obtain that necessary certifications. And it does really depend on the level of certification. But clearly, it's far less than a fully matriculated student if that's the path they take. And Dr. Graywell can certainly speak to the work that he has done to bring tuitions down at the Vermont State Colleges for the benefit the degreed student. But the other expectation is that students who may not be fully matriculated and enrolled can access things like, well, they used to be called, they're called advancement grants now through VSAC, used to be the professional development grants, as well as, depending on whether the legislative funding continues for some of the workforce work you've been funding over the last couple of years, there may be resources there. But it would be far, far less than a regular degree program. But I'm not sure we've actually figured that cost out yet. I can certainly find out what we charge for the current courses. It's minimal, but
Yeah.
Catherine, you may have something you want to add?
Right, the degree programs that we would offer, the tuition fees for that would be less than 10,000 per year. So that is a 2-year program. So that's the tuition portion of it.
Yeah.
And what else, in terms of certification, the fees for that, and any learning that they need to, appear in a test or something, that whatever the cost of that would be.
Did you have a question?
Just for the record, Captain Levester, Vermont State Colleges, we're currently charging around $400 for the 1-day meat cutting courses at Vermont Technical College. So if you were to sign up for an intro to butchering or a sheep or pig specialty or a chicken processing specialty, it's about $400 for the 1-day course for the current prices.
So you could fund that, okay? Right.
I may need.
You may have to.
I may need a new career because things just aren't going well here.
Well, I mean, if we could each throw in 100, we're there. If you want to go tomorrow.
I was already voted off this committee. They probably tried to get me Tuesday, Wednesday, now it's Thursday.
Well, we're looking for help on state day.
All right, thank you.
There you go.
But it is interesting work and it is important. And, we have all these shortages everywhere. Yeah, so, yeah.
It seems like every time I go to Newport to the meat, go get meat,
Yeah.
there's a different person.
Yeah.
Because they
Yeah.
can't find, so they keep them rotating from one store to another.
But I also recognize $400 is $400. And, if there's a kid out there that really wants to do this, I hope that doesn't, hope we can get them to do it, if it's really what they want to do.
We book our butcher over a year in advance for our pigs. We have to book a year in
Yeah.
advance to be on this calendar.
Wow.
Is that, yeah? Well, that's pretty encouraging. You're out a year?
A year.
So we've already booked for next fall.
I'm curious what deer season was like because it's got to be hard to find people, right?
And it happens at the same time, well, for us, the
Yeah,
same time we process our pigs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I do not have anything. I've shared my presentation.
Thank you.
I do want to also tell you that my own personal background is in agricultural sciences.
is that right?
So I'm an entomologist by training, and soil science is one of my big areas of research. So the agriculture program is near and dear to me. I'm sad to see that it was in such a state that we need to resurrect it. But my commitment to this program is going to be pretty strong because I see that there is a lot of need. Program tailored in this way, there will be a lot of students who would want that, not only Vermonters, but there could be others who want to take advantage in our region and other places too.
Yeah, do we have a good crew that's doing recruitment and outreach to our, to our high schools and middle schools to get students interested in coming to VTC?
Correct. We do have a very good admissions team that combines all three institutions. It's a kind of new team that we have set up. And they are engaging with our local schools in every region. And they are also engaging with the counselors. They had a breakfast for the counselors to come in, and even I personally attended all of those in all the campuses to meet with the counselors that came in. We are very serious about enhancing our recruitment efforts and reaching out to students and sharing what the new university will bring for them.
I think maybe it was in approach or one of the other meetings we were attending together.
Yeah.
It was discussed that UVM had 34,000 applicants.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was in that meeting too.
Yeah, and they can only take, what, 3,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And, if somehow we could get 1% of those 30,000 to come to Vermont, to VTC or one of the other state colleges for training, it would make a big difference for our enrollments because we're losing students nationwide. And so it's gonna be a real fight to get these kids from out of state to come.
Correct.
But hopefully we get positions so we can.
Some of these programs are tailored to students who do not aspire to go to college, for example.
Yeah.
But they will get the right skills. But if they also gotten few courses under their belt, who knows, they might get excited about, I can have a job, but I can also part-time pursue my undergraduate degree.
Yeah, they can do it from home.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is reaching out to those 45% or so who do not really go to college. So they could be also reached with these kinds of programs at early stage, maybe at the 10th grade level. Before they make their mind, they're not going to seek college.
And I don't know why, and I don't know if it's nationwide, but I think it is. We have a trouble getting our young men to go on to higher education for some reason. I can't imagine what their thinking is, but and somehow we got to instill in them that it's important to, get that behind them. And if they want to, whatever it is they want to do, go do it, but have a backup.
We will have esports for them on campus also, so that if they want to do that, they can engage in that sports. Esports.
Oh, esports, yeah.
No, there are other questions for?
Very helpful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Well, you've got a big job ahead of you, and we want to wish you the very best. And we'll, Richie and I are down in approach, so we'll try to get you a couple of bucks to keep going with. And as long as it's spent well.
Oh, for sure.
You know, we're all Yankee Vermonters and we expect to get $1.50 out of every dollar we spend. But no, you know, the state colleges are very, very important to Vermonters in general. And so we want to, you know, do all we can to help and get it rolling and organized and going well.
Yeah, we appreciate your support very, very much. What you have done over the last 2 years has been really very helpful to bring in this transformation that we're going through. It's, if you were not there, you know, some of the colleges could have easily closed.
And as bad as the pandemic and COVID was, if it hadn't have been for that, you know, it really made a great difference financially. And plus, you know, you kind of had to not be out in public, so it gave you folks time to get reorganized and so, you know, the old story of what is it, taking a lemon and making lemonade and doing better, that might be, you know, the outcome of the pandemic for us. And so again, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ellen, we didn't hear much from you, but we're going on.
No, it's all right. All I was doing was being here in case there was a question. I'm in full support of everything that's going on. It's fantastic. We've made a lot of progress and thank you for your support. So 100% ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your support.
Yes. We're early. We still got another half a minute.
I know.
Yeah, but we have to get started.
And Richie, we voted before you came in from the coffee break. Tomorrow you can't go on break because you're tired of getting back.
Are you ready to go out the air?